My name is Ethan Miles. If you asked anyone at Orion Solutions about me during those years, they'd probably just shrug. To them, I wasn't worth remembering. I was the IT guy. Quiet, predictable, invisible. I came in early, stayed late, and never asked for recognition. I fixed broken servers, patched security flaws, and made their jobs easier in ways they never even noticed. That was my place. Background noise in the grand orchestra of corporate egos. And for a long time, I accepted it. I told myself I didn't need their validation. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, eventually they would see my value. I couldn't have been more wrong. Everything changed the year I came up with Project Nexus. I had spent months working overtime, studying industry trends, and developing a revolutionary idea. Nexus was designed to completely transform the company's outdated infrastructure, cutting costs by nearly half and opening doors to entirely new markets. I crafted the proposal with meticulous care, perfecting every detail. For the first time since joining Orion, I felt proud, excited even. I thought this would finally be my moment to step out from the shadows. I was naive. The presentation day felt like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. I stood in the glossy executive conference room, surrounded by people in $1,000 suits who barely knew my name. Derek Chambers, the smug vice president of operations, lounged at the head of the table, flipping casually through my slides like they were junk mail. I pushed through my nerves, passionately explaining the potential of Nexus. The room remained eerily silent until Derek leaned back, stretched, and with a smirk said, "That's adorable, Ethan. But leave the big ideas to the adults, all right?" Laughter erupted around the table. My face flushed hot. I stammered, trying to defend my idea, but they had already moved on. Just like that, months of effort were dismissed in seconds. That humiliation would have been enough, but they weren't finished. The next week, without warning, I was summoned to HR. I thought maybe they were reconsidering Nexus after all. Instead, I was met by cold faces and a thick file that supposedly documented my misuse of company resources. Derek had accused me of spending work hours on unauthorized projects. My protest fell on deaf ears. The decision had already been made. I was fired effective immediately. No severance, no chance to clear my name. I was escorted out like a criminal, carrying a cardboard box filled with personal items as my former coworkers averted their gazes. Some of them even looked amused. As I stood outside the building in the pouring rain, numb and humiliated, I replayed every second in my mind. The sneers, the laughter, the betrayal. I had given Orion Solutions years of my life. Late nights, holidays, weekends, sacrificed without complaint. And yet they discarded me like garbage the moment I tried to rise above my assigned station. That night, I hit rock bottom. Alone in my tiny apartment, surrounded by the hollow silence of failure, I felt something inside me break. Not sadness, not fear, something darker. Anger. They thought they'd erased me. They thought I would disappear quietly and spend the rest of my life haunted by what they did. But they were wrong. They had freed me. Stripped of illusions, I saw the truth. I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. The next morning, I began to plot, not revenge, not yet, survival. I sold everything of value, my car, my gaming rig, even the watch my parents gave me for graduation. I downsized to a shoebox apartment and lived off ramen and determination. I reached out to old college friends and former colleagues who had left Orion long ago, burned out by the same toxic culture. Slowly, I built a team. People who believed in Nexus, in innovation over ego. Embercore was born in a dimly lit garage and fueled by shared resentment and relentless ambition. At first, we were nobodies, just like I had been. But nobodies work harder. Nobodies take risks. We lived on caffeine, coded until dawn, and pitched to every investor willing to hear us out. Rejection after rejection came, but I didn't flinch. I had faced worse. By year 1, we landed our first client. By year 2, we were a rising star. By year 3, Embercore was a force of nature. Meanwhile, Orion Solutions began to crumble. Their refusal to innovate cost them dearly. Clients defected, Revenues fell. Layoffs followed. I watched from afar as Derek and his cronies scrambled, releasing rushed updates and desperate PR statements. They couldn't compete. They couldn't adapt. The market was merciless, just like they had been to me. When Embercore went public, and our valuation soared past Orion's, I saw the headlines. Derek's face, once smug and untouchable, now looked aged and hollow in desperate interviews. They didn't know yet. They had no idea the worst was still to come. Because I wasn't satisfied with beating them. No. They took everything from me. And I intended to return the favor. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Orion's stock plummeted so low that whispers of acquisition filled the air. Through silent partners and anonymous funds, I began buying shares. Quietly, patiently. Until one day, I owned enough to call the shots. And that's when I made the call that would change everything. Prepare a buyout proposal, I told my legal team. Orion is coming home. As I ended the call, staring at the company that once fired me without a second thought, I whispered to myself the words that fueled every sleepless night, every sacrifice. You called me nobody. You're about to remember my name forever. Building Embercore was nothing like working at Orion. There were no luxury offices, no catered lunches, no teams of assistants ready to fix every problem. There was just me, a secondhand desk, and a laptop that overheated every time I pushed it too hard. I started with nothing except an idea and a fire in my chest. The same fire they had lit the day they threw me out like I was trash. In the first weeks, I hardly slept. My days blurred together, coding, researching, reaching out to anyone who might listen. Investors laughed in my face. You think you can take on Orion Solutions? They scoffed. They're too big, too established. I smiled politely, nodded, and left each meeting more determined than before. They didn't understand. Orion was big, yes, but they were slow, arrogant, rotten at the core. They hadn't innovated in years. They survived off old contracts and their reputation. That made them vulnerable. I wasn't trying to beat them at their game. I was building a new one. Slowly, I gathered a team. It started with Lucas Chen, a brilliant cloud architect I met in college. He had left Orion years earlier, sick of Derek Chambers and his cronies. Lucas introduced me to Ava Patel, a cybersecurity expert who was tired of working under glass ceilings. From there, the team grew. We weren't corporate drones. We were rebels, dreamers, survivors, people Orion had overlooked or chewed up and spat out. Together, we built Embercore from scratch. We worked in cramped apartments and borrowed co-working spaces. We shared instant noodles and slept under our desks, but every sleepless night brought us closer to something extraordinary. Our platform wasn't just another cloud service. Embercore was faster, smarter, and designed for companies that Orion ignored. Startups, mid-sized businesses, anyone tired of bloated, overpriced solutions. We automated everything. Clients could onboard in minutes, scale seamlessly, and pay less than they ever imagined. Word spread faster than we could have hoped. Our first clients came through referrals, then online forums. Soon, industry blogs started taking notice. By the end of our second year, Embercore wasn't a secret anymore. We were a disruptor. That's when Orion finally noticed us. Their response was predictable. Derek Chambers launched a PR campaign calling us amateurs playing in the big leagues. They slashed prices temporarily and promised their clients enhanced services. I watched them panic from a distance. Their arrogance had blinded them for so long that they didn't know how to compete. They couldn't move fast. Their internal bureaucracy slowed every decision. Worse, their best talent had left years ago. People like Lucas and Ava, people like me. Meanwhile, Embercore thrived. We landed major deals with regional banks, retail chains, and tech startups. Our revenue tripled in less than 12 months. Investors who once mocked me now begged for meetings. At conferences, I went from ignored outsider to keynote speaker. But success wasn't enough. Not for me. Watching Orion stumble gave me satisfaction, yes. But it wasn't revenge. Not yet. Revenge would come when they were forced to acknowledge who I had become and how badly they had miscalculated. I began preparing the next phase, quietly, strategically. My legal team researched acquisition laws. I set up shell corporations and investment funds. On paper, they were independent entities. In reality, they were all me. While Embercore soared, Orion's stock tanked. Poor leadership, client losses, internal scandals. Derek's incompetence was finally catching up. Their board replaced him with a turnaround specialist, but it was too late. The vultures were circling. I was one of them. Over the course of 18 months, I quietly accumulated Orion shares. Small purchases at first, nothing that would trigger alarms. But with every dip in price, I bought more. By the time they realized what was happening, I owned nearly 30% of the company. Their board tried to fight back. Poison pills, desperate, investor pitches, even merger talks with third parties. But no one wanted a sinking ship, except me. I wanted every broken, rusted piece. Because this wasn't about profit. It was about closure. One cold December morning, I received the call I had been waiting for. Orion's board, battered and desperate, wanted to discuss a buyout offer. I didn't even pretend to negotiate. I gave them a take-it-or-leave-it deal that heavily favored me. They had no choice but to accept. Within weeks, Embercore officially acquired Orion Solutions. The headlines were brutal. Tech startup devours industry giant. Orion's fall, from powerhouse to pawn. My inbox flooded with congratulations. Investors and analysts praised me as a genius. Colleagues hailed me as a visionary. But none of them knew the truth. This wasn't about vision. This was personal. In private, I planned my return carefully. I ordered renovations on Orion's main office, new branding, Embercore logos everywhere. The past erased overnight. But I left one date unchanged. The company-wide quarterly meeting. The same one where, years ago, Derek Chambers had humiliated me in front of the entire staff. I didn't want a press release. I didn't want an email. I wanted faces. I wanted them all gathered when I delivered the final blow. As the day approached, my team grew tense. "Are you sure about this?" Lucas asked one night. I nodded. "They need to see it," I said quietly. "They need to know." The night before the meeting, I stood alone in my new office, the one Derek used to call his throne. I looked out at the city skyline, memories flashing like ghosts, the laughter, the insults, the humiliation. I whispered to myself the words that had kept me going through every sleepless night. Tomorrow they will remember me. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The next morning, the stage was mine. The day had come. I stood backstage at the Orion Solutions headquarters, the same place where years ago I had been escorted out like a criminal. Back then, I was nothing. Just a disposable employee who dared to dream too loudly. Today I wasn't. Here as a guest. I wasn't here to ask for a second chance. I was here as the owner. The room beyond the curtain buzzed with tension. Hundreds of employees filled the seats, their faces tight with uncertainty. Rumors had been swirling for weeks. They knew Embercore had acquired Orion, but they didn't know what that truly meant. Would they be fired? Replaced? They didn't know yet. But they were about to. I straightened my tie, adjusted my jacket, and gave a nod. The doors opened, and I stepped into the spotlight. Silence fell instantly. I could feel their eyes widen, their minds racing to process the sight of me. Ethan Miles, the guy they mocked, the guy they threw away. I walked slowly to the podium, letting the silence stretch. Every second felt like poetic justice. Finally, I spoke. "It's been a while," I began, my voice calm, steady. A nervous ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. I didn't smile. I wasn't here to make them comfortable. Years ago, I stood in this very building, I continued, locking eyes with familiar faces in the front row. Some shifted uncomfortably. Derek Chambers sat there too, arms crossed, trying to mask his discomfort with arrogance. I focused on him. Back then, I shared an idea, Project Nexus, an idea that could have revolutionized this company. Instead, I was mocked, laughed out of the room, labeled as unimportant, disposed of like trash. You could hear a pin drop. No one dared look away. But I didn't disappear, I said, voice growing colder. I waited. I watched. I built. And while Orion clung to its old ways, Embercore grew. I paused, letting that sink in. Today, that journey comes full circle. Because now, I own Orion Solutions. Every desk, every chair, every file on every all server. They belong to me. Gasps filled the room. I saw it in their faces. Shock, fear, realization. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Some of you will thrive under Embercore. Those who believe in innovation, collaboration, and respect, you are welcome to stay. But those who built careers off arrogance, cruelty, and backstabbing, your time is up. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Derek leaned forward, his face tight. This is absurd, Ethan, he snapped, standing up. I turned to face him fully, my expression emotionless. Sit down, Derek, I ordered. My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. He hesitated, then, surprisingly, obeyed. I continued. Let's be clear. There will be no golden parachutes. No quiet retirements. Starting now, the following individuals are terminated effective immediately for misconduct, incompetence, and contributing to Orion's downfall. My assistant, standing to the side, began reading names. Each name hit like a bullet. Every executive who had laughed at me. Every manager who spread rumors. Every ally of Derek who had played politics while I worked tirelessly in the shadows. Derek's name was the last. He stood again, outraged. You can't do this. I built this place, he shouted. I stared at him, cold and unblinking. You built nothing, I said sharply. You inherited power. You abused it. And you destroyed everything good about this company. Security entered quietly. Derek looked around, expecting someone to intervene. No one did. Not a single person came to his defense. He was escorted out, humiliated, his legacy shattered in front of everyone he once ruled over. As the door closed behind him, I turned back to the stunned employees. For the rest of you, things will change, I said simply. No more politics. No more favoritism. From now on, your success will be earned, not handed to you. The meeting ended. Some cheered, some wept, some simply sat in stunned silence. I walked out without another word, leaving them to process the shift in power. Back in my new office, Derek's old domain, I sat alone, looking out over the city. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, replaying it in my head during sleepless nights, fantasizing about the look on their faces when I took everything back. And now, it felt hollow. Satisfying, yes, but not as sweet as I had expected. Crushing them didn't erase the years of struggle. Owning Orion didn't fill the void they left when they made me feel worthless. Still, justice had been served. That was enough for now. The next day, I walked the halls. Employees stared, but no longer with disdain. Some even smiled or nodded respectfully. I stopped by the IT department, my old stomping grounds. They were tense as I entered. Relax, I told them. You're safe. In fact, you're important. Their faces lit up. That was the first time in years they had heard that from anyone in charge. I knew what it meant to be invisible. I swore I wouldn't let others feel the same under my rule. In the weeks that followed, I personally met with department heads, mid-level managers, even interns. I listened. Truly listened. I didn't want to just destroy Orion's past. I wanted to rebuild its future. Yet even as the company stabilized and I earned the respect of my new team, the ghost of Derek Chambers and those like him haunted the halls. Not because they were missed, but because they were a reminder of what Orion used to be, and what I could so easily become if I let power blind me. Late one night, sitting alone in my office, I faced the truth. I had won the war. But was victory enough? Or was I slowly becoming the same tyrant I swore to destroy? The thought lingered as I stared out into the sleeping city, knowing the next chapter of my life, and Orion's, would test me in ways no enemy ever could. Victory wasn't supposed to feel like this. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, standing atop the empire that once cast me aside, watching every person who laughed at me forced to kneel. In my mind, it was supposed to be glorious, intoxicating. It wasn't. Weeks had passed since the takeover and purge. Derek Chambers and his loyalists were gone, erased from Orion's history as if they never existed. The company was no longer theirs. It was mine. Every decision, every signature, every whisper of ambition ran through me. On the outside, I was hailed as a genius. The media adored the narrative. The nobody who became king. Investors worshipped me. Employees, once indifferent or cruel, now watched every word they said around me. Their fear was tangible. They respected me. Or maybe they feared what disrespect could bring. Either way, they obeyed. And yet, deep inside, something didn't feel right. Late at night, in my massive office overlooking the glittering city skyline, I sat alone, staring at my reflection in the black glass. I didn't recognize the man staring back anymore. His eyes weren't hungry. They were tired. His jaw wasn't clenched with determination. It was tight with unease. I thought about the early days, back when Embercore was nothing but an idea in a dusty garage, back when Lucas and Ava and I ate instant noodles at midnight and laughed about how one day we'd change the world. We were dreamers then. Pure. Hungry. But for something more than money or revenge. What happened to that version of me? Somewhere along the line, I had stopped building and started conquering. I hadn't realized the shift as it happened. Success came in waves, and so did ego. When Derek mocked me, I wanted respect. When they fired me, I wanted revenge. But now that I had both, all I felt was emptiness. Power came with chains. Every move I made was calculated. Every relationship transactional. I couldn't show weakness, couldn't trust kindness, couldn't relax. Even Ava had started to pull back. She used to come to my office freely, excited to share ideas. Now she knocked. Lucas, once my right hand, spoke less and less about our vision and more about quarterly numbers. We were no longer rebels. We were rulers. And ruling, I realized, was a lonely game. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. I was walking the executive floor late at night when I overheard two junior employees talking in the break room. They didn't know I was there. One whispered, "He's terrifying, isn't he? Miles. He doesn't smile, doesn't joke, feels like he's always watching." The other replied, "Yeah. I mean, he saved the company, sure, but working here feels heavy now. Like you're one mistake away from being erased." Their words hit harder than any insult Derek ever threw at me. I stood frozen, realizing something horrifying. I had become what I hated. Derek ruled through fear. I ruled through silence and distance. Either way, the result was the same. People didn't admire me. They survived me. I went home that night, unable to shake the truth. I sat in the dark, whiskey in hand, replaying every step of my journey. The triumphs, the battles, the revenge. All of it had led to this cold, sterile throne. I asked myself the question no one dared ask. Was it worth it? The next day, I skipped the usual executive routine. Instead, I spent hours walking the building. No entourage, no announcement, just me, quietly observing. In the marketing department, I saw people working with heads down, afraid to make mistakes. In engineering, the spark was gone. Brilliant minds doing only what was required. Nothing more. In the cafeteria, laughter was rare, conversations guarded. I returned to my office and called Ava and Lucas. When they arrived, I didn't posture. I didn't pretend. "Talk to me honestly," I said. "What happened to us?" Ava hesitated. Lucas didn't. "We became the thing we swore we'd never be," he said bluntly. "You became it, Ethan." His words stung because they were true. I sat in silence as they spoke, about how our culture had shifted, about how employees feared my approval, about how, in my quest to destroy Orion's toxicity, I had replaced it with my own brand of quiet intimidation. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't sleep because of ambition or rage. I stayed awake consumed by regret. I had won, but I had lost something far more valuable in the process: myself. The solution didn't come immediately. Redemption isn't simple, but over the next weeks, I made changes, real changes. I dismantled the rigid hierarchy Orion clung to. I instituted open forums for employees to speak freely. I reconnected personally with departments, encouraging creativity and risk-taking again. I promoted leaders who inspired, not commanded. Slowly, the walls came down. Slowly, people started smiling again. Not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. I wasn't trying to be liked. I was trying to make sure no one else would ever sit where I sat and feel what I felt. The emptiness, the isolation, the belief that power was worth more than purpose. Orion began to transform, truly transform, not into Embercore's cold machine or Orion's old empire, but into something new, something human. And through it all, I found myself healing too. I had faced them. I had won. But my greatest victory wasn't firing Derek or buying the company. It was choosing to let go of the hatred that defined me for too long. I rebuilt Orion. But more importantly, I rebuilt Ethan Miles. And for the first time in forever, I no longer felt like a nobody. I felt free. Months passed. The chaos faded. The anger disappeared. What remained was peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from idleness or retreat, but the kind you earn after standing through the worst of storms and finally stepping into the quiet beyond them. Orion, once on the brink of extinction and later defined by fear, had become something else entirely. It was alive again. Vibrant. I saw it in every corner of the building now. In the engineering floor where teams laughed freely while brainstorming. In the break rooms where whispered gossip was replaced by open conversations. In boardrooms where ideas, not politics, ruled the discussions. I saw it in the people who no longer flinched when I entered the room. They greeted me, not with forced smiles or rigid posture, but with respect earned naturally, not demanded through intimidation. Orion had been reborn, and so had I. It hadn't been easy. The changes I made after that sleepless night weren't about image. They were about substance. I dissolved old titles that had created hierarchies of ego. I restructured the company around collaborative teams. I implemented transparent review processes so that promotions and raises came from merit, not backroom deals. I even made it a personal mission to walk the floors every day. I listened, really listened, to employees at every level. I remembered their names. I celebrated their wins. I shared their burdens when things got tough. Some couldn't adapt. They left. That was fine. What mattered was the core of Orion, the culture, began to shift. We weren't Orion Solutions anymore, nor were we just Embercore. We were something new. And that new wasn't about revenge or numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about people. I finally understood something that younger, angry Ethan never could. Crushing your enemies might win battles, but lifting others wins wars that actually matter. The world outside noticed too. Media headlines changed. No longer was I the ruthless nobody who conquered his enemies. Instead, they began calling me the CEO who turned revenge into renewal. Investors, once concerned about the hostile takeover, now praised the stability and growth we demonstrated. New partnerships blossomed. Talented people lined up to work for us. It wasn't just about success anymore. It was about legacy. I often thought about Derek Chambers during those months, about the arrogance that destroyed him, about how easy it would have been for me to become just like him, or worse. He had ruled Orion with cruelty. I could have ruled it with icy distance. But power without compassion is still tyranny. And I had already walked that dark road long enough. One evening, well past midnight, I stood in my office, the very one Derek once called his. But it didn't feel like his anymore. It didn't even feel like mine. It felt like everyone's. On the wall behind my desk, I had installed something new weeks ago. It wasn't a chart or a mission statement. It was a framed quote, simple and honest. Power means nothing if you forget who you are. I stared at those words, letting them settle deep into my bones. That was my story now. Not Ethan Miles, the man they fired and forgot. Not Ethan Miles, the man who returned to crush them. But Ethan Miles, the man who chose to rise above the cycle of pettiness and power games. Just as I finished locking up for the night, Lily, my longtime assistant, now promoted to chief of staff, stopped by my door. "Big speech tomorrow," she reminded me with a soft smile. I nodded. Tomorrow was the official rebranding ceremony. Orion Solutions would be gone forever. The new name, a symbol of what we had become, would be unveiled to the world. As Lily turned to leave, she hesitated. "You're different now, you know," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Good different or scary different?" She laughed. "Better. A lot better." I smiled genuinely, something I didn't do much back in the dark days. "Thank you, Lily, for staying even when I wasn't easy to stay with." She shook her head. "You were never the problem, Ethan. It was the weight you were carrying." When she left, her words lingered. The weight was gone now. Or at least, I had learned to carry it better. The next morning, in front of hundreds of employees, press, and partners, I stepped onto the stage. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't angry, I wasn't seeking validation, I was calm. "Today," I began, "marks the end of Orion Solutions. That company no longer exists. It died the day ego overtook vision, when arrogance silenced innovation, and when cruelty replaced compassion." The crowd listened intently. But in its place, something better was born. Not just a company, a community. A place where no one is invisible. Where ideas matter more than politics. Where failure is seen as a step forward, not a nail in the coffin. I paused and smiled, looking around at faces old and new. We are now officially launching as Nova. The screen behind me lit up with the new logo. Clean, modern, limitless. Applause erupted. Cheers filled the hall. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of something far bigger than me. Later that evening, as the sun set and the celebrations faded, I stood once again in my office. Alone, but no longer lonely. I thought back to the boy who once believed being quiet and invisible was his fate. I thought about the man who believed revenge was his only destiny. Both versions were gone now. What remained was someone better. Someone whole. I whispered quietly, almost as if speaking to my past self. "You're not nobody, Ethan. You never were." And with that, I turned off the lights and stepped into the next chapter of my life. No longer chasing power or payback, but building a legacy that would outlive every scar and every battle I ever fought.